What's going on? And welcome to Mark and Graham Podcast, episode 16. You are going to get me and Mark's reaction from The Last Dance last night. We put together a few list NBA coaches that we love, our odd man out players that we wish we saw in person, but I don't want to give it all away. Mark, how you doing, man?
Doing well, trudging along over here. I know you're out in Florida trying to get the most out of the quarantine as you possibly can, get a little bit of normalcy back in your life. I'm just waiting for sports to come back.
Yeah, so this is our 16th episode total, but our 6th episode during quarantine. So it's been a while. But we have, even though we don't have sports right now, I think The Last Dance was released at the perfect time. I'll let Mark touch up on that in a bit. We're going to start off with our clown of the day. And both of our clowns have to do with The Last Dance. My clown, if you were watching last night, there was a guy in the Bullets named LeBradford Smith. LeBradford Smith was a rookie, and they were talking about guys that just had a night. Like when B.J. Armstrong just had a night against the Bulls in that playoff. This dude, LeBradford Smith, back in 1993, I want to say, just had a night. He scored 37 points on Jordan, and the Bullets won the game. Basically, there's a story that goes that Michael Jordan was walking off the court. LeBradford Smith put his arm around Michael Jordan and said, "Hey, good game, Mike." And from there on, Michael Jordan said to his teammate on the plane, he goes, "I'm going to score the exact same amount of points as him, but in the first half." So the next day, Michael Jordan flies to Washington, scores 36 in the first half. And it turns out that LeBradford Smith never came up to Michael Jordan and said, "Good job, Mike." Michael Jordan made that story up to motivate himself. That's just one of the few things that I found absolutely crazy from The Last Dance last night, Mark. And we'll touch up on that in the next segment. But I want to hear your clown of the day.
Yeah, that's definitely a good one, and it's really wild that Michael Jordan's competitiveness was to the point where he could literally make up a story in his own mind to motivate himself. Like how do you even do that when you know it's not true yet use it as motivation? It's just something that I can't even fathom personally, but that's because I don't have the competitiveness that Michael Jordan does, nor does anybody on the face of this earth. But my clown of the day is definitely somebody that I haven't liked at all in anything I've seen from The Last Dance. I find his interviews really to be quite
Boring.
underwhelming and boring. Exactly. And that's Scottie Pippen. Scottie Pippen comes off very badly in episodes 7 and 8 of The Last Dance.
Horrible. And Mark, before you start talking, I had no idea about any of this. Like, I always thought that Scottie Pippen was like the best guy. Like, I thought he was always next to Jordan. And like, before you start talking, like, this documentary exposed a lot of people. And I'll let you touch up on what I'm referring to.
Yeah, and I mean, so for those that don't know or didn't watch last night, Pippen in the 95 season, I believe 95, when Jordan goes to baseball, and that's the season that everybody talks about. Oh, the Bulls didn't need Jordan. They still won however many games when he went to baseball. Yeah, but look at what happened in the playoffs. And there's the famous game against the Knicks. And, I mean, really, that whole series is just ridiculous. You talk about the Pippen dunk over Ewing. It's just a very famous series against a really good Knicks team. And there's the final seconds of game 4 or 5. I can't really remember exactly. And, they're on the bench, and Phil Jackson's drawing up the final play. And Tony Kukoc, who was a guy that, if you remember in the earlier episodes of The Last Dance, Jordan and Pippen already had major problems with him. During the Dream Team, they abused the guy because they hated the fact that Jerry Krause loved him and valued him more than a lot of the players that were on the team that was winning 3 championships at the time. So they draw up a play for Kukoc in the finals for the final shot, a guy who would hit several buzzer beaters throughout the season without Jordan. And Pippen is sitting there on the bench and gets wind that the final shot is going to Kukoc, and they're actually going to have Scottie Pippen inbound the ball. The best player on the court is going to inbound the ball. So the way he responds is at the end of the timeout telling Phil Jackson that he's not going back in the game. Phil Jackson asked him one time, "Are you serious?" And he says, "I'm not going in." He sits on the bench. Final play, 2 seconds to go. Kukoc hits the buzzer beater. They go into the locker room, and it was like mixed emotions. They didn't know how to feel because your best player let the entire team down by not going on the court in that spot.
But here's a part that, and again, whatever I'm about to say, I am quoting The Last Dance. I swear this is not coming from me. Um, something that made Phil Jackson one of the best coaches, and we're gonna explain, and we're gonna talk about that later in the show. Steve Kerr, when he was getting interviewed, he recalled the incident, and Phil goes, "Scotty, you coming in?" And Scotty said no. And Steve Kerr said that Phil Jackson said, quote, "F him, 7, you're in." And that just goes to show that why Phil Jackson's the best coach. Because a lot of coaches would have whined and complained. Phil Jackson didn't care. Phil Jackson said, "F you want to quit, 7, you're in." He put Kukoc, goes in the game, and hits the game-winning shot. And I just remember Kukoc saying, it didn't feel like we just won the game because our best player just quit on us. And Mark, I don't know if you remember the story that they were telling, but who was it that kind of stood up for the whole team and like made Scotty cry in the locker room?
Bill Cartwright. And Bill Cartwright, it was a leader of that team who was on 3 championship teams with the rest of them. And Jerry Krause that's one of his best moves, was trading for Bill Cartwright. And he was a veteran, and he comes in there, and right after the game, he's a guy that they all respect, and he said he started crying and getting emotional, saying, "You let us down, Scotty." And
you quit on us.
For once, that was something that really got to Scottie Pippen, a guy who really didn't show much emotion at all, because he realized that, like, for Bill Cartwright to stand up to him like that, like, he really was let down by what Scottie Pippen did. And I think, like, you see that was such like a close-knit family, that Bulls team, to see Scottie Pippen do
without Jordan too. And I remember they said, "What was the first season like without Jordan?" And he goes, "Great. Practices were nice. No one was yelling at us. We had Scottie Pippen, who was the soft-spoken one. Like, they loved that team. Not saying they didn't miss Jordan, but they loved playing with just Scottie."
And it's really cool to see Jordan then in the locker room for the Double-A White Sox, and he's watching, like, his competitiveness. He was watching every second of every game that season. I guarantee it. And
he knew he was coming back.
Another thing that I didn't really know is the way that I didn't realize I didn't know exactly that he came back in the middle of that season, and that he started showing up to practices quietly with BJ Armstrong. Like, that whole story of them going out to lunch together, like, it's really interesting to see. And a lot of people say, first of all, his baseball career we could go on about that for an entire episode in itself, because, like, I had no clue he had a 13-game hit streak when he joined the league. And they say that if he had the time, and if MLB doesn't go into a lockout, who knows? Jordan might have made it to the big leagues. To hit over 200 after not playing baseball for a decade is mind-boggling to me.
And you know what? And I think it's underappreciated how much Jerry Reinsdorf was like the glue to this. And I don't know if you missed it, but he said in The Last Dance, we kept paying Michael his basketball contract because he said, quote, he was undervalued as a player. He knew he got all that money from the endorsements, but he knew he deserved that player money. So he kept paying Michael Jordan his basketball money through baseball. And, if we're going to talk about baseball real quick, what a coincidence that he was managed. The Double-A White Sox have Terry Francona as their manager, who would later go on to, obviously win those titles with Boston. He's brought a lot of success to Cleveland with the Indians. And, he's a very renowned name in the manager world. And I just found that, like, out of all people, how is Terry, like, of course it's Terry Francona, It was just one of those, like, of course,
No, I thought the same thing. The whole lockout thing I thought was really interesting, because I didn't
Coincidence.
And I didn't realize that is what made him back.
Yep.
And it makes you think, like, if that doesn't happen, Jordan's competitiveness. He can't take a year. He can't take a year off from sports in general. He has to be playing. So it was really crazy to me to think like maybe if the MLB doesn't go into a lockout, maybe he just keeps playing. And like they show, it was all about his dad. That's why he went to baseball. He couldn't stand what the media was doing to him in the NBA. And it was something that him and his dad had already talked about, which I mean, we'll get into Jordan and his father, but that just Jordan's father and his impact on his life explains a lot of the actions of his career that people critiqued while it was going on. And now you look back and you understand a lot of what he did.
Exactly. And you know what? We've been on, our next topic after Clown was our last dance reviews anyway. So I just, what I really took from this episode is it really showed how vulnerable Michael Jordan was. And I think that, all of that emotion kind of came out on camera because someone asked him, like, did you not care that your teammates didn't think you were a good person? And, Mark, you said it to me earlier. He just said that I just wish my teammates knew I was just trying to make them better. And I just really feel like Michael Jordan's competitiveness is just so unmatched. And it was almost sort of like that harder Mamba mentality. Excuse me, I can't speak today. And I think he was, Kobe Bryant was just, I don't want to say softer because Kobe Bryant's not soft, but he was a softer version of Michael Jordan. And I feel like there's just so many parallel comparisons that you can make between the two players. That's sort of what I got because I've heard stories of Kobe Bryant getting on his teammates' asses during practice. LeBron James doesn't really do that. He doesn't. LeBron James is a nice guy. He tries to teach. He doesn't. He isn't about the business. But yeah, I think these two episodes were the best two yet. Mark, I'll let you kind of just go on a rant because I know you've been holding stuff in.
Yeah, no, I agree. I thought they were the two best episodes, and that final scene of episode 7 was incredible, where, like you talked about, he just becomes so overwhelmed with emotion when they ask him, like, does it bother you that so many of your teammates don't consider you a nice guy? And he really just, it kind of breaks him down to the point where, and he's not upset because people don't think he's a nice guy, but he's so upset and like emotional about the fact that people don't understand the competitiveness of him, and that really the idea of him as not being a nice guy is really just him trying to make you care about winning as much as he does. And like just the fact that he starts crying, like you don't see many tears from Jordan besides him talking about his father and that moment. So the two most important things in his life are his father and winning, and those are what drove him to be who he became. And another thing you get it. I thought this entire series so far, the documentarian has done an unbelievable job with the entire. And one thing that I've just been loving that they keep doing is the little scenes with the iPad where they hand it to Michael Jordan and have him watch what other players are saying about him in their interviews, and Jordan's reaction is just iconic. Like when he laughs at what Gary Payton was saying about how Gary Payton locked him down, and he's like, Gary Payton didn't have anything on me. He's like, I would have put 50 on his head. Like he just, I mean, we saw the same thing with Isaiah Thomas. It's really like hilarious to watch him react to that, and whoever thought of that idea is just genius. This is one of the most well done documentaries I've ever seen.
And I think it's the best documentary I've ever seen.
Absolutely. And what's cool too is the chronological order that they're doing it in.
It goes from 98 to 86, 98 to 88, 98 to 89, 98 to 90, and so forth. And it's like we're watching his whole career take place as well as his final career. And it allows you to, like, from like a fan's perspective, you're constantly making comparisons. I'm constantly thinking, wow, that was Michael Jordan in 88. Wow, that was Michael Jordan at the beginning of his career. That's what Jordan did in 98. Whoa, that's what he did in 99. Like It's just like I was able to, and also I didn't know Doug Collins was his coach. That was random, but I didn't know Doug Collins coached Michael Jordan at first. But yeah, Mark, do you have any final thoughts on Last Dance, or like what you hope to see out of these last two episodes?
It's going to be a couple final thoughts, I guess. One, it's going to be cool the way that this order, the chronological order is set up, is that finally the flashbacks to each season that keep going by. I mean, now we're up to, I believe, 97. So the last two episodes are going to be 97 and then 98. Like, what's going to happen? Sorry, yeah, 97 and 98. So what's going to happen is they're going to catch up with the flashbacks are going to catch up with the 98 season, and then it's all going to come together for the last championship, which is going to be really cool in the final episode. One thing that me and my dad were talking about this last night when we watched it that I never realized is Michael Jordan had a three-peat with two entirely different teams.
Well,
there's actually only
besides Scotty.
Scotty is the only player that was on all 6 championships. In fact, I believe he's the only player that was on more than 3. So he's playing with such a different group of guys every single time, which is really crazy. Like, think about Horace Grant, who's probably the 3rd best player on those 3 teams. Horace Grant leaves, goes to the Magic. That was another really cool scene, is watching when Shaq carries him off the court after they beat them. Like, Horace Grant was a really, really good player.
He was what Dennis Rodman just filled, but better.
So Horace Grant left, Rodman comes in, he wins 3. So there was Steve Kerr, he was on the second 3. He replaced what's his name?
Paxton, BJ Armstrong. Yeah.
Armstrong, first 3. So it's really unique to see that Jordan, it was such a great leader that he led 2 groups of players that were completely different than one another to 3-peats.
I will say this: my only wish is I wish Jerry Krause was still alive. I really do, because first of all, F that guy. Like, I hate him. But I really think I just want, like, they're making all these players talk about uncomfortable things. Like, imagine you sat Jerry Krause down right now and said, "Why the hell would you break this team up?" But we don't have him here, and like that's just it leaves me with so many questions. Why did this all unravel the way it did? I don't know if they're going to reveal it in the next 2 episodes, but that's just something I really want to know about.
I agree.
So I think that's enough for The Last Dance right now. Mark and I put together a top 5 coaches of all time list in our mind. It's not really our mind. I'm pretty sure everyone would put these, but me and Mark just, needed some content, and we were like, why not talk about the best coaches of all time, since we're talking about the Bulls, Phil Jackson. Yeah, so Mark, if you want to break down that list for us, go for it.
Yeah, I mean, based on The Last Dance, and it's obvious this is why we're discussing the topic, but I don't think it's pretty much a 2-man conversation for the number 1 spot. I would give the edge to Phil Jackson. He's got 11 rings, and he was responsible for the greatest dynasty of all time, won all 6 with the Bulls. And a lot of his legacy has been tarnished by what he did to the Knicks. But you have to keep in mind, that's a general management role, so you can't look. That's not part of his coaching career. But Phil Jackson was. You see in The Last Dance an inside look at the style of coaching that he had, and it was so unique to the game of basketball. And I love watching how he got his start. He came from nowhere. It's not like he was coaching even at the collegiate level overseas. And it's really just crazy to think that the Bulls spotted the talent in him as a coach. And exactly. And that's something that Jerry Krause deserves credit for. Because Doug Collins it's not like he was failing as a head coach. He just knew this is the guy that's going to lead this team. And that's why Phil Jackson's number 1. He has 1,155 career wins to only 485 losses. An absurd record for his career. Most championships in NBA history as a head coach. he's my number one for sure. And secondly, we had Greg Popovich, another guy that is just well regarded as one of the greatest head coaches of all time, part of the Spurs dynasty for years now with Tim Duncan, Tony Parker, Manu Ginobili, and then David Robinson. Um, he has actually the most career wins in NBA history, I believe, more than Phil Jackson with 1,272 and only 611 losses. What do you have to say about Greg Popovich? He's a guy that you've probably seen a little bit more growing up than a lot of the guys on this list.
I always make the comparison, and I could pick any five of these guys on the list and compare them. But I always say that Greg Popovich is like the Mike Krzyzewski of the NBA. You don't really see a lot of emotion come out of Mike Krzyzewski. It's just that demeanor doesn't have any emotion. He just lets his players orchestrate the game. When he has something to say, he'll bring over his player and say it quietly. I think Greg Popovich is I think he's just a lethal killer. Like he doesn't say what's on his mind, and he just I love his sideline interviews. First of all, I don't know if he's just one of those coaches that reporters dread to interview because he's just like, all right, is it over now? He's strictly business. I really think Greg Popovich is the epitome of what an NBA coach is. Even when he's celebrating, he's still under control. And if you look at his big three, I think it's the perfect representation of Greg Popovich. You look at the list that I don't want to reveal anything, but if you look at this list that we have, every single one of these coaches has had a Hall of Famer, without a doubt, like Hall of Fame small forward, Hall of Fame point guard, players that could orchestrate. Greg Popovich had a big three of Tony Parker, Manu, and Tim Duncan. And he had David Robinson. But David Robinson was kind of like pre-2000s, and I'm kind of just focusing on post-2000s Greg Popovich right now. I think that the way he was able to, use Tim Duncan as a centerpiece of a team, it just goes to show that you could do anything. And I truly think that Greg Popovich is literally there with Phil Jackson. It's just that Phil Jackson's 11 rings, you cannot look past the 11 rings. So, Mark, who we got for 3, 4, 5?
Number 3, definitely Pat Riley because of the teams he's been a part of. He was the coach of one of probably the second greatest team of all time behind the 90s Bulls, and that's the Showtime Lakers of the 80s. So he's the head coach of that team. Then he goes on to coach a lot of those Knicks teams that played against Jordan's Bulls, which were very, very good basketball teams with Patrick Ewing, John Starks, all those guys. He's got 5 championships, 4 with the Lakers and 1 with the Heat, which it comes later on with Dwayne Wade. Now he's obviously up in management with the Heat. His record of 1,210 and 694 losses is a very impressive record. It's a .636 winning percentage, which is really, really strong for a head coach. I think he's right there too. This is anyone on this list. I would say there's 4 very clear greatest coaches in NBA history. The 5th is a little bit more up for discussion. But Pat Riley, there's no coach that has more of a resume in terms of the 3 teams that he was a part of. I mean, there's so much variety there that Showtime Lakers, Knicks, and then the Heat championship team. That's just, he's really been a part of a lot. And
he's still the president. He's still the president of the Heat. Like the Miami Big Three, that was Pat Riley. Like
he's done so much, and that's why I think he edges out our 4th pick, which is the second most winningest in terms of championships in NBA history, and that's Red Auerbach. And for those of you, this is well before our time, but if you ever watch, if you want to know a little bit about Red Auerbach, go watch the 30 for 30 on the Celtics-Lakers rivalry. Auerbach was responsible for 9 championships with the Celtics, all of those Bill Russell teams, as well as the Larry Bird. He has a winning record of 938 and 479 for his career. They were playing less games then, I believe, which is why he might not have as many wins as the other guys. But when you're responsible for 9 championships, including 8 consecutive titles with Bill Russell, you got to be on the all-time greatest coaching list, and you got to be near the very top.
Now, Mark, I just have a quick question because I think about this all the time. I feel like coaches, you know, I hate to say it, but coaches that coach guys like Wilt Chamberlain and won a championship, Red Auerbach coaches Bill Russell in the '60s. I just feel like there's just a certain level of respect that those guys don't get that post '80s coaches like Popovich, Phil Jackson, Daly. I feel like that they get that these guys don't, and it's because I think maybe the lack of talent in the league. I just kind of want to get your take on that real quick.
I mean, I think that's the case in just about every single sport. We lose sight of a lot of guys like that. I mean, in football, for example, like Vince Lombardi, how much do we know about him because he coached so long ago? But that's somebody that, I mean, these are like the staples of the sport. And Red Auerbach, it's tough because you don't have footage of those teams. You don't have interviews of him. Nowhere near the media coverage. But I mean, when all you have to do is see winning records, and the stats speak for themselves. I mean, Red Auerbach he's considered the godfather of the NBA. So yes, it's easy to have recency bias when it comes to sports and especially coaching. But I just think that's a guy whose name deserves you got to put some respect on a guy like that's name. And then lastly, as our fifth and final for the top 5 NBA coaches of all time, we have a guy that's been discussed a lot in The Last Dance as well, and that's Chuck Daly. He led the Bad Boy Pistons, and he led the Dream Team. And that in itself, when you're talking about, he's clearly the 5th on this list, but that in itself is enough to put him on here, I would say. His final record was 638 and 437 for his career. He coached some of the biggest personalities in NBA history on both the Dream Team and the Bad Boy Pistons. And to be able to manage guys like that aren't the nicest people, aren't the most well-liked people in the NBA, but get them to work together to win 2 championships during a very tough era of basketball in the 90s, Chuck Daly deserves all the credit.
Now, because you brought up the Dream Team, I gotta say something. I just don't understand how you could pick the coach of the Bad Boys, leave Isaiah off the team, and fill the spot with Christian Laettner. Now, at the time, I feel like that makes sense. Do you think Michael Jordan lied on camera when he said he did not keep Isaiah off the Dream Team? Because I also heard something that the whole league didn't like them because they felt like it was going to F with the, chemistry of the team. Now, I can see that, but then why would they get Chuck Daly to coach the team? It's just confusing.
Because I don't think Chuck Daly was the problem. And I think more so than Michael Jordan lying, I think it's the rest of that Dream Team is just not willing to man up and speak up about the fact that no one on that team wanted Isaiah on it.
But Jordan's just an easy target to take the hit.
Exactly. Because I've heard so many reports that there were 8 guys on that team that came forward and said they refused to have him on that team.
It's nuts.
Now they're all going back and saying, we never said that, blah, blah, blah. And actually, I forget who it was, but some reporter got in trouble for saying that and had to come back and say, my apologies. I misreported that 8 guys on the Dream Team did not want Isaiah. And a reporter had to apologize. But I mean, if you're seeing that report multiple times, there's a reason. And Isaiah was the most hated player in the NBA at the time, other than probably Jordan. So I really believe that they didn't want him on that team. And Chuck Daly was a great head coach. They knew that.
You know what? You also said, real quick before we get to our next segment, I just keep getting sidetracked. You brought up speaking out. Now, if you remember in The Last Dance, there was a man who wrote a book about all the locker room stuff with Michael Jordan, and everyone thought it was Horace Grant that said something. Do you believe that Horace Grant was, funneling all these inside secrets from the locker room? Or do you feel like it was a bunch of guys and Horace is getting the blame for it?
Yeah, I mean, Sam Smith's book, that's what you're talking about. I think Horace Grant probably was one of them because he's well known to have not seen eye to eye with Jordan. That caused him to leave. They just didn't. Horace Grant wanted more respect than he got because he was the third wing on that team, and it was all about Pippen and Jordan. And I definitely think he would have leaked some of that information, but it was multiple guys. It was definitely multiple guys in that locker room talking about it. And, a lot of people, too, say that they were bothered by the way Pippen and Jordan treated Jerry Krause. Sorry. Because think about this. A lot of those
They
guys.
They bullied him. They picked on him.
Exactly. And a lot of those guys were role players that were on the team because Jerry Krause found them. Like a Bill Cartwright is the only reason he has 3 rings to his name is because Jerry Krause found a role for him and traded for him. So if you're a guy like Bill Cartwright, aren't you going to be a little bit offended when you see the way that your 2 star players are treating the guy who put this team together? I think that's something that can't be discounted. And there's no doubt that multiple players on that team were speaking out against the dysfunction.
Yeah, I mean, overall, that team just had such an unhealthy balance at the end of it. They were winning to win a title, and they wanted to get out. And at the end of the day, I think it was Jerry Krause's fault. So really, I'm just excited for these next 2 episodes, and we will stop talking about The Last Dance and our coaches right now. So Mark had a really good idea about making a list of our starting 5 NBA players whose names start with our first initials. So Mark, I just want to know where you heard of this or what made you think about it.
I mean, we're all bored right now, clearly, during the quarantine. And there's all kinds of weird challenges like this going around on Twitter. I had somebody send it to me on Twitter, and I filled mine out. Obviously, we'll get into it, but I have the man himself, Michael Jordan. So I said, why not? I'll fill mine out. I sent it to a couple of my friends, and today we decided to do it on the podcast. So maybe it's something that the listeners can all take a look at and create their own line. And, all we have really right now are hypotheticals. So
yeah, me and Mark are going to post this list on Instagram, and you guys are going to vote. Whose team would win, mine or his? Obviously, it's going to be mine, but sometimes you just, a vote's a vote. You have to let people vote. Okay, so Mark, you want to go first, or should I go first?
You can go first. Lead off.
All right, so my name is Logan, obviously, so starts with an L. My first player, I was so happy, LeBron James. And by the way, these are all players in their prime. Because my last player, you're gonna be like, wait, you want him on your team right now? I'm gonna be like, no, not right now. So Mark knows who it is. I'll explain that in a sec. So I would have LeBron James, Luka Doncic, Larry Bird, LaMarcus Aldridge, and Lamar Odom. Now these are all in their prime again. And honestly, it was pretty easy to pick the first 3. LeBron, Luka, Larry Bird. They're all amazing players. Luka's not even in his prime yet. This guy is going to be, one of the best international players to ever play. And it's sort of cool how the Mavericks took him, and the Mavericks took Dirk Nowitzki, and he became their, MVP player for years to come. So I'm really excited to see how Luka comes out of this. And, picking LaMarcus Aldridge, I love his post work. I love his footwork. And I think that he has, he was a part of a Trailblazers team that just could never get that lift off the ground that they needed into the playoffs. And I think that now he's on the Spurs and he's coaching, he's got a coach in Greg Popovich. He'll get way better. 5th being Lamar Odom. When Lamar Odom played with Kobe Bryant, I don't know about you, Mark, but I liked watching Lamar Odom. I thought he was a really good left-handed player. He was a good, he had a really hot wife. Never mind. We're talking about his game. I'm sorry. He was really good in the paint. His 3-point shot was really good. And overall, he was just a really good player to watch. So that's my 5. What do you think?
I like your team a lot. L is a tough one when you get down to those last couple, but the LaMarcus Aldridge is a great pull. And Lamar Odom, he's a 6th man of the year. He was a really, really good player on championship teams at the time. As far as mine are concerned, the first 3 they practically write themselves. You got Michael Jordan obviously leading the team. It's really actually unique that we have, with our 2 names, you got LeBron versus MJ, the great debate right there. But then my second role player is another top 5 player in NBA history, Magic Johnson. So I had Magic Johnson bringing up the ball, Michael Jordan. I couldn't even imagine a team with the two of them on it. I don't know how they would play together. They both are ball dominant players. And then you add another top 10 all-time player, in my opinion, Moses Malone at the power forward spot. Moses Malone, double-double machine. I've raved about him before on this show and in previous podcasts with our guest, Nick. Moses Malone, just one of the all-time greats. Now, the last two players get a little bit less obvious, have to dig a little deeper. There's not as many M-named players in NBA history as you would think. But a guy who Greg Popovich credits a lot of his success to, one of the greatest role players of all those Spurs teams, Manu Ginobili. I'll put him as my small forward and just an all-time great shooter, scorer. Really will fit nicely with the stars on this team. And then at the big man spot, I'm going to go Marc Gasol. Another great all-time big man, great rebounder, double-double machine, and somebody that I think deserves a little bit more respect than they get in this league. So that's my starting five. We'll be posting them on the Instagram later today, and you guys can vote on whose you would take in a game of pickup basketball. Just a little bit of fun, an idea we had to get some fan interaction going, and you guys got to make your lineups now with your names.
All right, so we're going to move into Odd Man Out, and me and Mark had a really good idea of, Mark thought about players that you didn't get the chance to see, and I was like, you know what about players we didn't get to see in person? Because in my mind, you could watch a player on TV, but I feel like to actually be there in person, watching them play, it's a completely different feeling, Mark. You agree?
Mm-hmm.
All right, so this was any sport. I'm going to start. I'll give my 5-4-3. Number 5, Lawrence Taylor. I'm a huge Giants fan. I think Lawrence Taylor is the most dominant Giant by far. And I just wish I was able to see him and Harry Carson tear it up for Bill Parcells. It was just, and I watched the Two Bills documentary the other day, and it just made me and I miss when football was gritty like that, and I miss when they didn't protect the quarterback so much. And Lawrence Taylor had, he was having field days. Number 4, Barry Sanders. I'm a Giants fan again, and everyone calls Saquon Barkley like Barry Sanders 2.0. And I just wish I could see Barry Sanders play, because he only played for 10 years. First team All NFL every year he was in the league. And I really feel like he was one of those players whose career got cut so short, because the Detroit Lions, they just never knew how to build a team around him. And I just wish that I was able to get, that experience. Number 3, in my mind, the most dominant fighter next to Muhammad Ali, Mike Tyson. I wish I was able to see Mike Tyson fight. Just watching these guys, watching this guy's highlights, I get scared. Mike Tyson is the scariest human being on earth. But he's obviously a fun guy. He's been in movies like The Hangover, and I don't know. I just feel like seeing Mike Tyson in person is just like a whole, another world. All right, Mark, who you got for 5-4-3?
Just a side note on Mike Tyson. You actually might get your chance, because apparently he's coming back to fight. If you've seen the videos of him working out, he looks like he's in ridiculous shape. And it sounds crazy, but if anybody is gonna give it a shot, it's probably Mike Tyson, because he's out of his mind. I wouldn't be shocked if he ends up in some sort of televised money grab fight. And, even if Vegas will make a lot of money on it, because he's one of those guys where, as old as he is, people will still bet on Mike Tyson to win a fight as an underdog, because if he gets a hold of one, he'll get the win and he'll get a knockout. As far as my list is concerned, my number 5, I went with specifically prime Shaq. Shaq's a player that, you see it in The Last Dance with the Magic.
He changed the game.
Dude, people forget how crazy that was to see when he first came into the league. And it had never been seen before. His size is something that didn't belong in basketball at the time, and he just dominated the game like no other. I couldn't imagine sitting courtside for Shaq's games in his prime. I couldn't even imagine standing next to the guy, let alone watching him play basketball with a bunch of other athletic freaks. Shaq's a guy that I really just wish I got to experience more as a fan and see him in his prime. We got to watch him a little bit more when he was washed up he was a different player with the Heat and the Cavs. But if I saw him in his prime, especially with the Magic, not even the Lakers, yes, but with the Magic, when he was in a little bit better shape, I couldn't even imagine. Number 4, I went with Barry Bonds. Barry Bonds, in my opinion, you know what? This is a subject for debate we could get into later on with maybe debating the steroid era of baseball. But Barry Bonds, I think, is the greatest baseball player of all time, in my opinion.
Think so? I mean, steroids. Come on, steroids.
We'll get into that
Steroids.
in a later episode. But Barry Bonds, nobody hit the baseball like him. Even if he wasn't on steroids and before he was on steroids, he could absolutely rake. I couldn't imagine watching him hit balls into McCovey Cove. I went and toured that stadium actually and listening to the tour guides talk about him and the experience that they had watching him play. I mean, the statistics of him, the amount of balls in MLB history that have been hit into McCovey Cove, he has like 75% of them. It's ridiculous. I wish I got to see him in person. And number 3, I have a guy you already touched on, Barry Sanders. Barry Sanders we got robbed of the career he would have had. And it's really, I watched, if you get the chance, you should watch The Football Life about him, because a lot of analysts talk in that Football Life about how Barry Sanders, he had the rushing record and Emmitt Smith clearly passed it. But every single analyst and player will tell you that Barry Sanders had that record. There's an asterisk next to Emmitt Smith's name forever, because Barry Sanders would have had that by 1,000.
His career was cut so short, and like people don't understand that. Like Barry Sanders retired at like 30? What was it? 31?
Yeah, it was a 10-year career. He retired because he was just sick of it. He was sick of playing for the Lions. He was sick. He struggled with the media big time. He was sick of the media attention. It's very similar to what happened with Jordan, except he never came back. And for Barry Sanders, that he didn't really chase those accolades the way a lot of players do. And he didn't. He had that record at the time, and he said, "I'm going to walk away. I don't care if as far as I'm concerned, I accomplished everything I wanted to." And Barry Sanders had a weird relationship with his father, where his father never really said often that he was proud of him. He told him one time, like the year he retired, or I believe he told Barry that the most proud he ever was of him in his life was the day he retired. So Barry Sanders never thought about going back for that reason. All right, let's hear your 2-1 and then odd man out.
All right, so my 2 has to be the swingman, Ken Griffey Jr. Specifically, like, year 2, 3, 4 when he was on the Maryland or Jesus Christ, the Mariners. He just had that athletic ability that people didn't really see in baseball. He had that huge, lengthy figure. Who played center field and could hit a freaking ball 475 feet. In my mind, Mark, I kind of want to hear who you think, but I think my favorite swing of all time had to be Ken Griffey Jr.'s, without a doubt. Right?
I absolutely. It's iconic, and players try and mimic it today. I mean, think of a Cody Bellinger is trying to do the same thing right now. He had the most iconic, sweetest swing in baseball, and it's something about baseball. Every swing looks better from the left side. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Every swing. So my 1 has to be Bo Jackson. I think Bo Jackson's the greatest athlete of all time. If you were to ask me if I could go back in time and see one person, it'd be Bo Jackson. Like, there has still to this day has never been a player like Bo Jackson. Oh yeah, you could say Deion Sanders, but still, could Deion Sanders break a bat over his head? Could Deion Sanders hit a leadoff home run in the All-Star game in center field? No. Against another All-Star pitcher? Absolutely not. There just doesn't have to be much debate about this. I think Bo Jackson's the best athlete of all time. number 6, my odd man out, just because I saw him play on TV a lot, but that's Kobe Bryant. Kobe Bryant is just one of those revolutionary players, once in a lifetime. If you didn't see Michael Jordan, you saw Kobe Bryant, and I'm not saying Kobe Bryant's better than LeBron. I'm just saying if you look at the two, there are just so many parallel comparisons you can make between Kobe and Michael, from mentality to shot choice to percentage of the time the ball's in their hand to just the way they treated their teammates to their head coach. Like, Michael Jordan was the harder Kobe Bryant, and Kobe Bryant was literally Michael Jordan in a mirror. And I just think that I missed out on seeing one of the best players of all time play. So that is my odd man out. Mark, what do you got?
All right. I think that those are great picks there. Number 2, I'm going with a Philly guy, Dr. J.
Okay.
Julius Erving, from what my dad tells me about him, like, there's few players in NBA history that were as exciting to watch as him because of the dunks, because of there's the famous basket, cradle shot underneath the hoop. He was so athletic, and that was something during that time that the NBA had never really seen. He comes from the ABA and just has this new style of play, the afro, the Converse. I think he would have been iconic to watch, and I wish I was around for his era. Number 1, I'm going Tiger Woods. Tiger Woods,
Yeah.
if I could watch him play in person, he's the greatest golfer of all time.
Yeah.
I'm a big golf guy. I like watching golf. And Tiger Woods, I mean, just think about, I think one of the greatest athletic feats I got to watch was on TV even, was when he just came back and won the Masters last year. And
that was awesome.
Watching something like that in person, his celebrations when he drains a long putt, Tiger Woods, to follow him around in the Masters would be incredible. That's got to be my number 1. I wish I got to see that once. And then my odd man out, I'm going to go with Walter Payton. Very similar reasons to Barry Sanders. Those 85 Bears teams, the players on that team talk about Walter Payton as if like he was just such an unbelievable role model for them, and the leader of all those teams, and the work ethic. Somebody that, I mean, he is, so many great players nowadays consider him their role model, and he was just that running back that everybody modeled their game after. Walter Payton's a guy that I wish I had more of a perspective on. And, an honorable mention I'll throw in on this category is also Eric Dickerson. He's a running back that had incredible size and was somebody that played the game like nobody today does. So,
Agreed.
Walter Payton is definitely my odd man out, and Eric Dickerson I'll throw in as an honorable mention.
Yeah, you know what? Walter Payton was just one of those guys whose career got cut short, because he got sick, and it's just a shame, that a guy like him who, like, when you think NFL running back, like, in the grand scheme of things, like, you say Walter Payton, like, it's Walter Payton, and I think people forget about how good he was because of that 85 Bears defense, Like, you think 85 Bears, you think the defense, but they still had freaking Walter Payton as their running back. So that's what we have for Odd Man Out. I'm going to post on our Instagram, if you were to go back in time and see one person play in person, tell us. I'm going to put it on the Instagram story, and I'm going to check out all your answers. And I'm going to post the most interesting ones. So now we're just going to give a quick update on post-pandemic plans, what we've heard from the NBA, MLB. I know, Mark, you've heard some stuff about Major League Baseball and their plans to come back.
Yeah, it's coming out today that the MLB is getting close, very close to announcing their official plan. It seems like the most likely scenario is what we talked about a couple episodes ago, putting teams in 3 divisions, the AL East, the NL East together, the NL Central, AL West, NL West, playing in their actual stadiums with no fans. That's the one thing that could eventually change. It would be an 80-game season, and you would basically only be playing the teams in your division to keep it geographically sensible. Based on how everything's looking by the time the season starts, the one change that could be made is instead of playing in home parks, they might have to go back to the idea of remote locations in Arizona and Florida. So that's the one thing that could change. But as of now, they're hoping to play in home parks with no fans, obviously. So, I mean, how do you feel about it? Have you seen any of the Korean, the KBO? And is that something, I mean, there's no fans playing in those games. Is that something that's going to bother you, or are you still going to be tuning in?
Honestly, here's how I look at it. Like, these guys don't get paid to play in front of fans. They get paid to play baseball. They get paid to play basketball. They get paid to play sports. The fans pay to see them. They don't get paid to play in front of fans. So at this point, it's just like doing a job. If you have a job, like the people at Publix in Florida, they don't just get paid because customers come in. They get paid because they work for Publix. The people coming in, the amount of people that come in, that's not up to them. I definitely think it's going to affect professional sports. College sports should not be played. Okay, you're a student first, you're an athlete second. If students are not on campus, student athletes are not on campus. College is a different world. If you're college sports should not come back until fans come back because that's completely unfair to the athletes. These professional athletes, they're getting paid millions of dollars to play a sport. Okay? If you're getting paid millions of dollars to play a sport, I don't give a damn how many fans there are. You're just playing to play the sport. Do your job. Okay? Worry about your fans another time. And that's how I feel about this. Like all these, and even LeBron James, like, I'm not playing unless there's fans. Why, bro? Because you don't have enough popularity. Do your freaking job. Okay? We could watch on TV. Give us some damn entertainment. That's your job. That's what you could do for us. Okay? Don't be worried that your 85 friends can't come to your game. All right? Just do your job. That's how I feel. I feel very strong about this. Just do your job. No matter what it takes, just do your job and don't complain.
See, I think the only issue I have with that is when you factor in the families because it's a quarantine. So the only thing I agree with the fact that they're getting paid, but it is tough when you consider the fact that they might not be able to necessarily see their families if they're quarantined somewhere else because you can't mesh like that. That's the only time. Like, I understand the people who are like, my wife is pregnant. I can't go back right now. Because
I get that.
That's the one thing I do get. But I would agree. I think when it comes down to it, if you're a guy like LeBron James, you got to be ready to play.
Exactly. And you know what? I get it. Mike Trout's wife is pregnant. Like, that's a different story. But, as for the other, 90 guys on the roster, you should, 45, 60, however much an MLB roster has, there's plenty of guys to play. Okay? We need to play. We need to move on. Even if that means no fans. That's how I feel about this update on post-pandemic. Mark, any final thoughts before we finish up with our Mark and Graham of the day?
Not exactly. Just one thing that happened this weekend, the UFC fights, they went on. Dana White
Yes.
got a little bit of ridicule for the fact that he was interviewing the fighters directly after the game, right next to them. People were like, why couldn't you do that over Zoom or like a FaceTime type thing? And he was like, I want to talk to these fighters face to face. They just put their life on the line. I want to see it in their face while I'm interviewing them. And, he got a little bit of backlash for that, but credit to him for finding a way to put on the event. I mean, it's really weird watching and listening to a fight. If you see the highlights, you can hear every punch. So that was.
And it's probably weird for the trainers too, because the trainers they're yelling at their guy and telling him what to do. And if there's no fans, it's like, can't they just hear exactly what they're saying? But again, that's life, and you got to do what you got to do. But I do think Dana White is the most badass commissioner or owner of any sports company in the entire world.
Nuts.
All right, so our Mark and Graham of the day, because we've been talking about The Last Dance so much, I figured I might as well throw one in there. Shout out to Steve Kerr for taking a punch and standing up for Michael Jordan. I did not think that was possible, and that was just another thing that made me think that Michael Jordan's a one-of-a-kind person. He literally said in The Last Dance, he goes, I punched the smallest guy on the court in the face, and I felt about that small. And Steve was like, yeah, I wasn't taking any crap. So I punched him in the chest, and Michael Jordan goes, I punched him in the eye. So I definitely thought that was an interesting story. Mark?
My mark of the day, I'm going with something. I mean, I heard this on another podcast, Barstool Sports, part of my take. Go listen to it if you're looking for something entertaining, because they're the most hilarious podcast in the game right now. Joe Burrow was a guest on there. He's good buddies with the Barstool guys, and Joe Burrow was talking about the fact that they were kind of making fun of him, saying, Joe, you realize you're a multi-millionaire, and are you still stuck in your childhood home right now because of quarantine? He's like, yeah, I haven't left. So just think about the fact that Joe Burrow is currently one of the richest athletes of his age in the world. He's a multi-millionaire number one pick, and he's sleeping currently in his childhood bed with Star Wars sheets, a Star Wars themed room from when he was a kid. And he was saying in the podcast that he still has to ask his parents to go to the grocery store. Millionaire, and this is what he's doing. So I just thought it was really funny to listen to him talk about the fact that circumstances are so unique right now that this guy is literally a multi-millionaire and can't leave the house. He's sleeping in a twin bed or something in his childhood.
Oh, it's hysterical. It's like, you know, but it also goes to show what Joe Burrow is like as a person.
Exactly.
So tonight, me and Mark will be recording on the NBA Stories podcast with our NBA insider, Nick Nasby. That'll be up tomorrow night on Spotify, Apple Podcasts. If you haven't heard it, look it up. I was on the Karl Malone episode. This will be Mark's first time on it. Mark, any final thoughts?
No, I'm very excited for the NBA Stories podcast tonight. Just once again, go check out Nick Nasby's podcast. He's great NBA knowledge. And he's somebody that we're going to continue to have back on the show. We can tell you guys like listening to him just like we like debating with him. So we're going to keep going with this NBA stuff because we're really enjoying talking about it and getting the feedback from you guys.
Yes, sir. And also remember, Mark is going to be throwing up the teams that we have, starting with our first initial, pick which team would win, and also send us your team. I'm going to throw up on our Instagram story, what player would you go back in time to watch if you had the opportunity? That's all we have for episode 16. We will see you next week, and we are getting closer and closer to our episode 20 special.